Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. I am Precious Chukudi. Alright, we'll begin with the front pages of the papers this morning, starting off with Vanguard. And Vanguard is leading with terror war, 886 hardened Boko Haram fighters for trial. The writer says for prosecution of Kanji, Niger State, says Major General Musa, 323 detainees transferred to Operation Safe Corridor, Gombe for DDR. We can see a photo story showing the opening session of ECOWAS Parliament. On page 27, 2023, beware of politicians, CJN warns judges. On page 2, 2022 Merit Award, federal government disqualifies all 32 nominees. Nigeria issues travel advisory to citizens visiting US, Europe. Stories above, 2023, Buhari Sultan Lumumba seeks end to ethno-religious politics. Yobe North, Lawan loses as appeal court affirms Machina as APC candidate. It's doubtful Heathers willfully destroy farms. That's what the federal government is saying. You can see that story on page 3. The big interview, what we are doing to improve environmental health. Dr. Baba Ehoroikon, Registrar, CEO, that's what he's saying. On page 9, Zulum apologizes to Atiku over attack on convoy in Borno. And lastly, on the front page of Vanguard newspaper, 2023, attacks on INEC facilities, unfortunate. That's coming from YAKUBU. You can see that story on page 3. Away from Vanguard, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian is leading with cyber crimes raise concerns for 30.2 trillion naira monthly e-payment. The writer says Nigerians count losses as fraudsters get sophisticated empty bank accounts. Death of IT staff worsens recovery time in banks. NCC issues over 9 security alerts since beginning of 2022. Expert seeks review of Cybercrime Act 2015 kicks against plea bargain. Stories below, we have appeal court reinstate Adebutu, others in Ogun. Beware of politicians craving for power. CJN warns judicial officials. Adeleke suspend OCEC chairman, 6 others, dethrones 3 monarchs. You can see that on page 5. We have enough food for Nigerians, Agri Minister boasts. Stories above, Senate President Lawan loses at Court of Appeal. Attack on facilities troubling, won't deter us from conducting credible polls, INEC vow. Alright, let's take a look at The Nation newspaper. The Nation is leading with Adeleke hits Osun State with gale of sack, reversals. The writer says workers, 3 monarch, OSEC chair, others fired, 30 palm sec demoted. Lawmakers draw battle line with governors over state name, anthem, logo, others. Stories above, we have a Supreme Court overwhelmed by 6,884 cases. CJN Ariola laments. Beware of money passport theft in US, UK. Government warns Nigerians. Ghana and Morocco likely to carry Africa's flag to round 16. Lagos selects 3 bidders for $2.5 billion Fort Milan Bridge. Alright, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. The Punch is leading with APC Assembly Tako Adeleke, Governor sacks 12,000 workers. The writer says APC fume says Governor cutting endless litigation, agitation, distractions. State of Osun backed by law, Governor's action illegal, says Assembly. Sacked LG chairman head to court. PDP backs Adeleke's actions, hit APC. On page 28, 10,000 resident doctors remaining in Nigeria. That's coming from NAD. Contractors suspend Lagos Ibadan road construction, resumes January. You can see that story on page 5. Kano APC chair caught with 367 PVCs jailed. You can see that on page 28. Stories above, foreign NGOs, fintech firm linked to terrorism financing. No candidate for national award. Nominees fail exam. 50% material deployed. Burnt offices threatening polls. That's coming from INEC. And lastly, on the front page of the Punch newspaper, ASU warns of new crisis. seeks intervention. And that's all we can take on the front pages of the papers this morning. Join us after the break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We're just joining me still today in the news on Vanguard Life. I am Precious Chukudi. Joining me to talk about some of the stories on our front pages of the papers this morning is Mr. Dayo Akintobi, publisher of YAKUBU Today, Ikeja Today, and Lekki Today. Good morning, sir. It's good to have you join me this morning.
Good morning, Precious. Good morning to all our viewers.
How are you dealing with this fuel scarcity?
It's tough. It's very tough. There's queues everywhere, and then there's chaos in the petrol stations. People are shoving and pushing and fighting. Then there's a problem between those who want to buy in jerry cans and those who are queuing, and it's a terrible situation. And meanwhile, they keep passing the buck. Oh, it's the marketers, or it's the private depots, or it's NNPC. We don't know what's really responsible for this.
And you're telling us that once they take out subsidy, how much you're going to be paying?
400 naira a litre.
It's really alarming. All right, let's just delve in this morning, and we're talking about terror war. Now, the theater commander, Northeast Joint Operation Hardened, Major General Christopher Musa, said that 886 hardened Boko Haram detainees were currently awaiting transfer to Giwa project in Kanji, Niger State, for prosecution. Now, what are your thoughts on this DDR program? That's the radicalization, demobilization, and also rehabilitation program for this repentant Boko Haram. What do you think about this program?
There are two different aspects to the dealing and the handling with these Boko Haram suspects. You might notice that headline said hardened. The ones that are considered hardened, they don't believe they are really repentant. They just happen to have been caught during interdiction activities, but they are not repentant, so they can't necessarily be rehabilitated. So government is trying to separate them into two different sections. The hardened ones that we know that these ones are fully indoctrinated. They are not sorry for what they have done. They are not repentant. If they get free, they will go back and continue to commit terrorism. So those ones, government is taking a hard line with them and saying, we are prosecuting you. Once we find you guilty and convict you, we are going to penalize you with incarceration for as long as possible because you continue to be a clear and immediate threat to our people. Now, there's another set that are quote-unquote not hardened, that government still believes there is hope for them, that they are truly repentant, that in their heart of hearts they are really sorry, and they won't go back to doing this kind of thing. So government is saying those ones, there's still hope for them. Let's de-radicalize them. This is their DDR program. The idea is to rehabilitate them and reintegrate them back into society, get them back to join their families in the hope that they can become productive members of society. First of all, the key thing is government is probably looking at it and saying there's about 50, 60,000 of these people that are in our custody. Can we really prosecute all of them? Can we go to trial for each and every one and hope to secure a conviction? And even if we do we have the penal facilities, the jails, to hold that many people despite all those who are already in there already? So they're probably looking at it and saying, perhaps those for whom there is still hope, that they have downed arms and their remorse is genuine and deep, there's still hope for them. Let's not throw those ones away like throwing the baby with the bathwater. Let us still try and rescue those ones. But the ones that we know there is no hope for, the ones that are still a clear and present danger to Nigerians, let's prosecute those ones and throw the key away. So that's a maybe 1,500, 1,600 that are held at this detention center. And those 886, they've said these ones are unrepentant, they are hardened, let's go ahead with their prosecution. Then the others, let's process them for the DDR program. That's what's happening.
All right, I would like to ask, should that be the case really? Because, I mean, if we are saying we want to select the hardened and the ones that are not hardened, but then these guys are still part of the Boko Haram, do you think that that's like a right step to take? Because, I mean, we have people who have involved themselves in criminal activities. It's just like saying, oh, this one didn't want to steal, you just joined them. So, but the fact that you were caught too doesn't really mean that you are part of the criminal activities going on. So why do we have that separation of hardened Boko Haram detainees and the ones that are not hardened for rehabilitation? Why do you think it's really necessary?
As I explained earlier, there's a logistics issue with trying to prosecute that many people. Look at even the United States situation from back when it went to do this 9/11 fight in Afghanistan up to tomorrow, which is a good almost 20 years after. There are still prisoners in Guantanamo Bay who are still awaiting prosecution because they rounded up thousands and thousands and thousands of these militants, these Arab people that they feel responsible for spreading terrorism across America. So they rounded up hundreds of thousands of them, and they haven't been able to do much with them because each one has to go through an individual judicial process, which requires a trial, requires evidence, requires witnesses. It's a cumbersome process. So if you look at what we are doing with Boko Haram today, and you say you want to prosecute each and every single one that is arrested, because remember, some might be guilty by association, like you correctly identified. Some might just have been hanging out with these people, not necessarily actually committing the act themselves. They might have just been within the group. So how do you separate those who are not hardened and who are just hanging out with these people, maybe just to get something to eat, maybe to just have company, so you identify the ones who committed the acts themselves and who are hardened, who are fighting for a cause, and those ones you prosecute. The ones that you feel there is hope of redemption, who are not fully and completely indoctrinated and who may just have been guilty by association, and there's hope for those ones you separate. The reason I said is because you don't want to choke on a morsel that's too big for you to swallow. It is almost impossible for you to prosecute that many people, incarcerate them, and extract societal justice from that many people. So what will end up happening, if you try to end up prosecuting that many that you can't cope with, is at the end of the day, the whole process will grind to a halt. And at the end of the day, all of them will go scot-free. So it's better to, I agree with the federal government's policy on this, that let us identify the ones that are hardened, and the ones we can still rehabilitate, let's rehabilitate them.
All right, so let's move ahead and talk about this one now. Despite frequent invasions of farms and killings of farmers in different parts of the country, the federal government is saying that they are really unsure that herders intentionally, unleash their cattle on farms. What do you think about this situation?
That's rather laughable, because whether they intentionally unleash them or they don't intentionally unleash them, the bottom line is the farms are suffering destruction. I don't see how it is possible that when the herders are setting their cattle out to graze on somebody else's property, they can say it's not intentional. Because, of course, they see the grazing fields, they see the vegetation, and they herd their cows in that direction so that they can feed. Because remember, the herdsman needs his cattle well-fed, well-nourished, source supply of water, so that the cattle can grow, can get healthy, and can be sold at a premium. So clearly, the herdsman's motive is to find where his cow can graze. To now say he's not entering that farm intentionally or with the intent to destroy, I think that's rather dubious, because he's sending the cattle out to go and graze. Does he not know that the act of grazing is destruction of somebody else's crops or somebody else's farm? So I think that statement is a bit disingenuous on the part of the government. And when I read it, the part that befuddled me even further was when he said that we don't have any food insecurity in Nigeria. Nigeria produces enough food, and that if prices are rising in the market, it's not due to food scarcity. It's because of inflation, it's because of COVID, it's because of the flooding. And I said, that's not possible. When you look at all the things that have happened, yes, COVID happened, flooding happened, so many other things happened, it has impacted our ability to produce food. So there is clearly a shortage of food. It's easy to throw out these statements, but if you ask him to bring evidence of the fact that there is enough food to feed 220 million of us, he can't show the evidence. So that's just one of these throwaway statements that I say government thinks they pull the wool over people's eyes by just saying things that sound good, that feel good, but are not justifiable in reality. People are not stupid. We have our common sense to be able to see what is real and what is not real. And the fact is, the truth is, at this point in time, we are not producing enough food to feed ourselves. Maybe the gap is being met by imports. You know, of course, they've banned importation of rice, they've banned this. Are we producing enough rice locally? Even if we are, transportation issues, no fuel, flooding, all those things are hampering distribution. Then, you know, of course, there's the herdsman problem as well. The herdsmen have destroyed crops. Insecurity has stopped farmers from... So you look at all these factors and you say, it cannot be possible that we are producing enough to feed ourselves. So that Minister of Agriculture who spoke yesterday, I dismiss what he had to say.
All right. Of course, the farmer herders conflict is an age-long problem, and it's been going on. You know, there was a time it was back-to-back and all of that. Even though we still have communities who are still suffering this farmer herders conflict, basically. What measures do you think that the government can, you know, use to like checkmate this situation?
Well, government's approach is ranching. They did this thing called the National Livestock Transformation Program that they enacted a few years ago. And their own belief is that what needs to be done is land needs to be set aside to create ranches. Where the problem of us came was that government wanted to acquire land by force. They wanted people to give their land. They wanted to earmark certain spaces of land in each state or each region and say farmers go and graze there freely. And of course there was objection to that. They say farmers should buy or rent or lease land to graze their property. No business gets any free land to do their trading or their rearing or whatever. Why should cow herders be treated differently and just be given a free hand? So that was where the problem came up. And the livestock transformation program of the government is supposed to address that issue, either by way of working with state governments to provide government-owned land as reserves where cows can graze. Despite the fact that they say it's an age-long problem, when we were growing up in Nigeria, even if these clashes occurred, they were minimal. There was no violence. The herders in those days used to carry sticks just to guide their cattle. There was never any issue of armament or AK-47s. So if they strayed into farmland that's owned by somebody, they discussed it among themselves and they resolved it, and everybody went their way amicably. There was no issue of people being shot, people being killed, crops being destroyed. So what happened to the way we used to do it before? The problem, of course, seems to be that terrorists have infiltrated the ranks of the cow herders and are using that as a cover. The genuine herders on their own, they are doing a business and they protect that business by every means possible because they themselves don't want clashes with people that would disrupt their value chain. So those who are genuine among them, they want to do business. They don't want anything to disrupt their business. But because terrorists are using that business activity as a cover, the whole paradigm has changed. There's now arms involved. There's now intentional or willful confrontation with farmers and things like kidnapping for ransom. All that is being done under the cover of that sector, and that's what the issue is.
All right, let's move ahead and talk about this one. Now, the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud YAKUBU, has described the incessant attack on the commission's facility as unfortunate and expressed fears over the impact of the recurring attacks on the 2023 general election. And of course, it's very glaring. We've been seeing these attacks. And what do you think about this? It's
unconscionable, really. It's as if there is a concerted effort to not make the 2023 elections happen. Because see, INEC has facilities in every local government. Because remember that CVR, ongoing voter registration, you go to your local government INEC office to go and do your registration. So INEC has to, for logistics purposes, have offices in every one of the 774 local government offices. And that's where they put their election materials, PVCs, BVAS machines, ballot papers. That's where their ad hoc staff operate from and go to the polling booths from. So that is each of those offices is the nerve center of INEC's operations. So when they are set ablaze or destroyed, it's hampering INEC's ability to conduct that election in 2023. So when you see like the one that happened yesterday or the day before, I think in Enugu, and they destroyed the entire office, carted away the PVCs, how is election going to hold in our local government? Now, all the PVCs that are uncollected are gone. They might be in other people's hands. The BVAS machines may have been destroyed. Perhaps ballot papers were there as well. We don't know. But what INEC is saying is that unless we beef up security and begin to prevent these attacks from happening, it will hamper its ability to conduct free and fair elections in all 774 local government. Remember, if one or two local governments are missing, we can't say even the presidential election has been concluded until all 774 local governments have reported their results. The election is not concluded. So if you have one or two that are outstanding, we can't declare a winner. So it becomes a real problem when these things are happening, because these attacks hamper INEC's ability to carry out elections in those particular areas. So it looks as if there's a conspiracy, and this is intentional, that some people don't want that election to hold. So the question to ask is, who stands to gain if the elections do not hold? That's the million-dollar question to ask.
According to what we have the numbers of INEC offices attacked by hoodlums so far is like 50 across 21 states. And of course, the question is, what are the security agencies doing? Because if the elections have not started yet, and this is what we're seeing now, what's going to happen eventually when the election starts?
It's really scary, because you look at it, like you said, elections haven't started yet. As we get closer and closer to the elections, the stakes get higher, the tension accelerates, and there's a greater propensity for electoral shenanigans, including violence. So if 90 days, this far down, we're seeing 50 offices already destroyed in 21 states, then imagine as it gets closer and closer. So that's why I say it seems to be a conspiracy. There's a concerted effort. Maybe it's a domino effect. There's something called the copycat effect in psychology. That some people are looking at it and say, oh, they did it over there, let's do our own here as well. Or maybe it's just a group of people, one group of people who is intent on scuttling the 2023 elections. But from a security standpoint, you ask yourself, does INEC have the kind of manpower? Is enough army and police assigned to INEC that can go and monitor all 774 INEC offices in all local governments? Is it possible? And because think about it, they can't put just one security person. That person can be overwhelmed easily. So it will be 4 or 5. So you look at 4 or 5 times 774. How possible is it when we have security challenges all across the country, all over other areas? So security, what can they do? Maybe CCTV, maybe better fortification, maybe moral suasion. Maybe the Ministry of Information and Culture should begin a campaign of sensitizing people to the importance of keeping INEC offices secure, so that locals can begin to give information when because these things don't happen in a vacuum. They don't happen in isolation. If an attack is going to happen, it's usually people within that community who are either involved or who arranged it or who know about it. So perhaps they can begin to be persuaded to give information to the security forces to forestall this kind of thing from happening.
All right, the federal government has issued a travel advisory to Nigerians traveling to the United States and Europe. And according to them, they're saying that Nigerians must be, self-alert. They must, because of the stealings of their belongings and, including passports. What's your take on this? I mean, this is just coming from not too long ago when the U.S. also issued a travel advisory, to their citizens here in Nigeria. What does this look like?
On the surface, it looks like revenge. It looks like vengeance, because it makes no sense, really. When you think about it, first of all, who needs a Nigerian passport anyway? A Nigerian passport is not useful to anybody but a Nigerian anyway. And even the way they've done Nigerian passports now with all your biometric stuff, nobody can use it. Besides, I don't see any United Kingdom citizen or United States citizen who will want a Nigerian passport for anything. Here is the situation. Crime is crime all over the world. There are pickpockets, there are bag snatchers everywhere, not just in the UK and the US. In fact, I venture to say that in South Africa, there's more crime on Nigerians than there is in the UK or the US. If, as a Nigerian, in the United Kingdom or in the United States, you are attacked and robbed, it's not because they identified you as a Nigerian and robbed you for that reason. It's simply because you are a victim of crime. It's random crime. anybody can attack anybody anywhere and pick their pocket and take their bag. So this advisory looks facetious on the surface. It's very superficial, and that's what makes it look like Nigeria too wants to flex and say, yeah, okay, so you advised your citizens to get out of Nigeria. But there's a difference between terrorism and petty crime.
Yeah.
The reason UK, US gave advisories to their citizens to leave Abuja a couple of months ago was because there was a direct terrorist threat that endangered the lives and property of the citizens of those countries, right? That's why they gave the advisory. Now you look at this one and it's laughable. It's infantile, really, because you look at it and you say, wait a minute. Even here in Lagos and in Nigeria, our bags are stolen every other day. And in the UK and the US, American citizens and British citizens, their bags are also stolen every day. So what is it that makes this rather compelling that you have to issue an entire advisory? And remember, look at where it came from, to show you that it's just politics and they're just playing. It came from the Ministry of Information and Culture, Honorable Minister Lai Mohammed. It did not come from the National Security Advisor. It did not come from the Foreign Office, the Nigerian Foreign Office in the UK and the US to advise their people there as an advisory. It came from the Minister of Information. So that lets you know that it's just really a superficial attack back on those countries to say, okay, so you did it to us, we're going to do it back to you. I mean, global geopolitics is not played like that. We're just toying around here.
All right, let's take a look at Mr. and Mrs. And Mrs. is speaking. She says, you must prove to me that you really love me. I want you to give me something that will remain indelible in my heart forever. And Mr. says, I promise you'll be the first woman to spend the redesigned Naira note in this neighborhood.
And that's supposed to stay in her heart forever and ever. It's a big deal. The new Naira note, yes. Indeed.
What do you even think about it, the new Naira note?
Well, I think it achieves its objective, which is to force people to bring out the old monies they have. A lot of people have made a lot of noise about the fact that, it was just a recoloration, not a redesign, because they just changed the colors, the designs are the same. For me, as long as it achieves the objective, and you can see people already coming out bringing Naira because the old notes, the old color will become obsolete January 31st. So as long as it achieves the objective, I think the question we should be asking is, how much did CBN spend? That's the critical thing. How much did they spend to do this recoloration? Is the cost justifiable? Did they charge for a redesign and they just change color? So that's what we should be interrogating. How much did it cost?
Someone said the added filter.
Okay, so how much did the filter cost to add? So that's the main issue. But in terms of the objective that was intended, it will achieve that objective.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Dario Akintobi, publisher of Liquidity Today, Ikeja Today, and Lekki. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Pleasure is always mine.
Also, remember that you can equally like, share, and subscribe on all our social media platforms showing on your screen: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Also, our WhatsApp number is displayed on your screen. To find out up-to-date stories, you can go to our website, www.vanguardnjr.com, to find out more. I am Precious Chukudi, and thank you for watching.